Have you ever asked yourself what drives a person to leave everything they know behind, to pack up their life, their dreams, and to move halfway across the world for someone else? For Darrel Odhiambo, a young Kenyan mother, that answer seemed simple: hope. Darrel had hope for a better life, hope for love, and hope for a future where her young son could thrive. But sometimes, hope can lead us into the darkest of places. And for Darrel, that hope would ultimately cost her everything when she moved from the warm landscapes of Kenya to the cold streets of Scotland, all for love. Welcome back to the Crime Gist. My name is Damisa. Darrel Akinyi Odhiambo was born in 1986 in Kenya. She grew up with her 4 sisters, Mercy, Diana Rose, Hendrix, and Kate, who all looked up to her. Being the eldest of the 5 siblings, Darrel understood responsibility from a really young age. She also had big dreams in life, but she was more than just a dreamer. She was a doer and a hard worker. Her LinkedIn profile showed that she was a businesswoman. She was also a single mom to a young boy named Jimmy, raising him all alone with no help at all from the boy's dad. Her son, Jimmy, truly lit up her world. It was for him that she worked tirelessly. It was not always easy raising him alone, but she was getting by. However, Darrel wasn't content with simply getting by. She wanted more opportunities, more security, and more possibilities for the people she loved. In the year 2015, when Darrel was 29 years of age, her path crossed with that of a Scottish chartered surveyor and a man who would become her future husband, Walter Buchanan. It's believed that they initially met online. They then arranged for a physical meeting in Thailand, which is where they first met physically. At 59 years old, Walter Buchanan was nearly 2 decades her senior, with a successful career and 2 children from a previous relationship. Their physical meeting in Thailand seemed to seal their relationship as their connection was immediate. Here was an accomplished older man, charmed by this ambitious young Kenyan woman with dreams bigger than the continent she called home. For Darrel, perhaps Walter represented security, opportunity, and a chance to give Jimmy the life she had always envisioned for him. Walter appeared stable and the epitome of Scottish respectability. When the holiday in Thailand was over, Darrel went back to Kenya and Walter to Scotland. But they stayed in touch every day, with Walter coming to Kenya once in a while. After 2 years of long-distance romance, Walter traveled to Kenya in 2017, this time to marry the love of his life. And so Walter Buchanan and Darrel Odhiambo became husband and wife, that is, the Buchanans. After getting married, as expected, she began packing up her life to move to her husband in Scotland. Leaving Kenya meant leaving everything familiar: the sounds, the smells, the comfort of family nearby, her work, but Darrel was ready. In 2018, with Jimmy by her side, she boarded a plane bound for what she believed would be her new beginning. Hamilton, South Lanarkshire, would become their home. This is a world away from the warm Kenyan sun. For someone who had never experienced a Scottish winter, who had never been so far away from the voices and faces that had shaped her entire life, this transition must have felt both thrilling and terrifying for her. Walter Buchanan, the man she had married, seemed to be everything she had hoped for. He was a respected professional and a man who appeared to offer the stability and security she craved for herself and her son. Everything in the beginning felt like a fairy tale, but fairy tales, as we all know, don't always have happy endings. The fairy tale would soon begin crumbling piece by piece. The man Darrel had fallen in love with in Thailand The man who had courted her across continents was not the man she found herself living with day after day. She soon found out that Walter Buchanan had a temper, was controlling, and demanded things be done his way and his way only. As months turned into years, Darrell began to confide in the people around her. John and Violet Fisher, her neighbors, became unwilling witnesses to her pain. Violet Fisher, an 82-year-old lady, would later recall conversations where Darrell spoke of Davy, of fear, and of a marriage that had become a prison. In one of those conversations, Darrell told Violet that her husband had taken her passport. Think about that for a moment. That small document that represents freedom, the ability to move, to live, and to go home. Walter had even taken that from her. The isolation was deliberate, the control systematic, and as messages between husband and wife would later reveal, the abuse was not just physical, it was also racial, designed to cut at the very core of who Darrell was as a person. She sent many messages to Walter, pleading for honesty and for basic human dignity that every person deserves. But those messages were only answered with hostility. For 6 long years, Darrell endured behavior that no person should ever have to tolerate. February 18th, 2023 was a date that would forever mark the end of one life and the destruction of another in the Buchanan's household. That evening, Walter Buchanan was out with friends in Bothwell, Lanarkshire. While he was enjoying his night out, Darrell was at home, alone with her thoughts, her fears, and her growing suspicions about her husband's faithfulness. It's not very clear where Jimmy was on this night, but he was not home. Imagine her state of mind as the hours passed, sitting in a flat in Scotland, waiting for a husband who seemed to care less and less about her feelings with each passing day. The message she sent to him that night would be among her last. "I hope you're having fun in Bothwell without your wife, you cheater," she wrote on a text to him. These words contained years of pain, frustration, and suspicion. These same words would set in motion the final and tragic confrontation of their marriage. When Walter Buchanan returned home that night, he found Darrell waiting for him. The confrontation that followed wasn't unusual. They had argued many times before about his behavior, his late nights, and his treatment of her. But this time would be different. This time, Walter Buchanan would cross a line from which there could be no return. The argument escalated. In a moment that would haunt two families forever, Walter's anger turned physical. He struck Darrell, then grabbed her by the wrist and pushed her onto the bed and began to strangle her. The woman, who had traveled across the world for love, was now fighting for her life in the hands of the man she had trusted the most. The medical evidence would later paint a horrific picture: fatal neck compression, brain injury, bruising across her body, and a fractured rib. This wasn't a momentary loss of control. This was sustained violence that ended a life full of unrealized dreams. At 7:12 a.m. on February 19, 2023, that is the following morning, Walter Buchanan made a phone call to the emergency services saying that he had found his wife cold to the touch. But from the very first moment, his story didn't add up. To the emergency operator on the phone, he suggested that she might have choked in her sleep. To the paramedics who also arrived at his house, he painted a picture of a woman who had been drinking and who was prone to falling, claiming that she had fallen down the stairs while intoxicated. But the responding officers weren't fooled. The evidence spoke louder than Walter's changing stories. The bruises on Darrell's body showed clear signs of manual strangulation. This told the real story of what had happened in that flat. Walter Buchanan was then arrested on the spot. Under interrogation and faced with evidence he couldn't explain away, Walter's story evolved once again. Now, he claimed it was self-defense. She lunged at him first, he said. He had only been protecting himself when he killed her. The post-mortem examinations would prove what investigators already suspected. Darrel Odhiambo had been deliberately murdered. She had suffered significant compression to her neck, brain injury, bruising, and a fractured rib. These weren't injuries from a fall or from choking in her sleep. These were the injuries of a woman who had been deliberately killed. But perhaps the most damning of all was what investigators found when they dug deeper into the couple's relationship. Text messages revealed a pattern of abuse that extended beyond physical. One message from Walter to his wife was particularly chilling. "I hope you die, you black." These weren't the words of a man defending himself. These were the words of a man whose hatred had finally boiled over into murder. The High Court in Glasgow became the stage where Darrell's story would finally be told in full. A jury of 12 people listened as prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece, painting a picture of a marriage that had become a nightmare. They heard about the abuse Darrell had endured. They heard about the isolation, the control, and the racial slurs. They heard about the night she died and about Walter's attempts to cover up what he had done. Walter Buchanan's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. His changing stories, his lies to the emergency services, his attempts to blame everyone but himself, none of it could explain away what he had done to the woman who had trusted him with her life. On January 22nd, 2024, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty. On April 2nd, 2025, Walter Buchanan faced the judge for sentencing. The now 66-year-old man, who had once been respected in his profession, now stood as a convicted murderer. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. At Walter's age, this likely means he will die behind bars. But no sentence could bring back Darrel Odhiambo. No verdict could undo the pain inflicted on her family. No punishment could give young Jimmy his mother back or erase the trauma of losing her in such a violent way. Darrel Odhiambo's journey from Kenya to Scotland was meant to be a story of hope, of dreams fulfilled, of love conquering distance and difference, but instead, it became a story that reminds us of how quickly a dream can become a nightmare. But perhaps there's still hope to be found in Darrel's story. Hope that other women in similar situations will find the courage to speak out. Hope that friends and neighbors will recognize the signs of DV and offer to help. As we remember Darrel Odhiambo, the devoted mother, the ambitious woman, the sister and daughter who deserved so much more than she received, let us also remember this: DV thrives in silence, and it can only be stopped when we all refuse to look the other way. For anyone listening who might be experiencing DV, please know that help is available. You deserve better, you deserve safety, you deserve to live. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. As usual, please do not forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. I'll see you right here on the next one.